My name's Andrew Beard. I am the pastor at the chapel at Seaside in Santa Rosa Beach, Florida.
And I am Sarah Beard, and I am on staff. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church where my whole roots were built on you have a daily quiet time and you pray. And I didn't really know much about any other ways to connect deeply with the Lord. And so when we started to develop our own little rhythms of silence or figuring out solitude or what was fasting really about, I still had never touched on things like Sabbath or anything like that. So then when Practicing the Way came around, we had been tracking with some of the teachings of unhurrying our lives. And then when we heard that Sabbath was the first practice, we said, let's give it a go.
Yeah.
So we invited a very small group of people in because we cannot lead people in a direction that we are not going. So that, I think, is the first thing that I would tell other pastors to do, is to get a small group of people together, get them together and just say, will you just try this with me? Get people who are brave and willing to try, and then practice it. And then you have like something to go from.
When you do Sabbath, then when you like delight and enjoy these things, and then you have seasons of fasting, you're kind of experiencing the breadth of like the human experience intentionally, and you're like able to enjoy. When it's just like full feasting all the time, you have no palate for what is good and what is bad.
Yeah.
And then when you're fasting, then you like come alive to these types of things as well. When you do prayer, then you have things to turn to in days of fasting. So like they help like integrate one another and help us to be more like the way God designed us to be, which is crazy.
Anytime we introduce something like a spiritual discipline, people are going to ask the question, is this legalistic? Or I was already told that, the work has been done, I don't need to do anything. And so that is, we're always facing that. And so I think the question that we tend to need to answer the most is why. And so we've sort of turned it into this experiment of like literally calling it an experiment. So we're getting ready to run the Sabbath practice church-wide, and I'm calling it the Sabbath experiment because my question to them is like, why not? If you grew up thinking that this was not for you, maybe that it actually has something for you. And so why not just try? Why not just see?
This is what Jesus did. And if we think that Jesus was the greatest person that ever lived, and he gave us the example, the perfect example of what it meant to follow after God and be obedient to God, like why would we not at least try to emulate what he does? Well, and I think when you think about churches having hesitation of, or why should I do this? You can come up with lots of cool, clever sermon series or like 3 things to practice this week or live out. Okay. If you did that over the course of the year, you have 150 something things for people to try to practice or live out. Well, let's just stop and try to figure out what it looks to rest in the Lord. Stop and rest in Jesus and realize you do not orchestrate everything, and you get the opportunity to like rest in him. Okay. Now let's talk about what it means to pray and to like turn your heart towards him, turn your mind towards him. And as you start doing these slow things, you start realizing that is a rich life. And to quote Eugene Peterson, it is a long obedience in the same direction. And that is what the life of faith is like. So these practices just become opportunities to follow in those footsteps as we follow after Jesus.